She said she wanted me to be her bridesmaid. Forgot to mention her fiancé and I were in the same secret society with history. Maya asked me over mimosas, her diamond flashing like it was part of the sun. We were at Hotel Vivienne, on the terrace, 2 stories above the city's noise and 5 levels below where she thought she belonged. She wore white, of course, not the dress, not yet, just the kind of curated white that says I'm already halfway married. She reached across the table, grabbed my hand and squealed, "Be my bridesmaid." I smiled the way I'd been trained to smile since boarding school, soft enough to seem flattered, sharp enough not to reveal surprise. "You'd look perfect in champagne silk," she said, already swiping through a Pinterest board. The theme is old money garden, but like with edge. I let the word edge hang between us while I sipped. Then I said yes. Because of course I did, because there were cameras, friends, strangers watching. And because Maya makes a scene out of everything, even sincerity. Only after I said it, after she clapped and squealed again and hugged me across the linen-covered table, did she drop his name. "Julian's flying back from London next week. You're going to love him." The glass in my hand tilted, just slightly, not enough to spill, not enough for her to notice. Julian, I hadn't heard his name in almost 10 years, not in full. Not without a whispered title behind it. Maya went on, something about the proposal, the villa, the fireworks. I nodded, smiled again. But my fingers curled tighter around the stem of my glass. Because the last time I saw Julian, we weren't planning a wedding. We were swearing each other to silence. And that night never made it into any Pinterest board. We were 19, Yale, sophomore year. Late fall, the kind that turned stone buildings into cathedrals and secrets into currency. They called it the Hall, not a hall, the hall, tucked beneath the East Quad, behind a wrought iron gate and a door that only opened if you knew which part of the crest to press. The society didn't have a real name, not on paper, just initials, just emblems, just those impossible rules carved into old oak and older tradition. That's where I met Julian, not in class, not at parties, in the dark. He was already chosen, fast-tracked through some senator's bloodline, and an article in The Economist about emerging heirs. I got in because someone whispered that I was dangerous in a useful way. The night they initiated us, we drank whiskey older than both of us and signed a vow in Latin that tasted like ash. Julian sat across from me in the library after it was over, his tie loosened, eyes glassy but sharp. He said, "This place changes people." I said I was already changed. He smirked. "That's why you're here. The thing about secret societies is they're less about secrecy and more about shape. You enter one person, and they mold you not into someone new, but into the version of yourself you never admit out loud. We had rules, no press, no pictures, no repeats. And that night when the fire burned low and someone played the piano like it was bleeding, Julian kissed me. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't innocent. It was a seal, a warning. We never spoke about it again. Until now, the society had rules, not printed, not spoken, just passed down, coded into gestures, stitched into blazers, buried in the inflection of names. You didn't talk about it. You didn't photograph it. And above all, you didn't repeat it. What happened in the hall stayed in the hall, not because of honor, that was for amateurs, but because of leverage. Everyone had something to lose. That was the point. We met twice a month in that sealed room beneath the quad. No phones, no staff, just 23 chairs arranged in a perfect circle, each one marked by a sigil older than most countries. We read old ledgers. We performed rituals half the group didn't believe in and the other half pretended not to. We drank, we whispered, we watched each other. Even now, we still know how to watch. Julian was the kind of society member they wrote folklore around, second-generation legacy. Speechwriter at 20, IPO whisperer by 27. His name appeared in closed-door board meetings and blind-item gossip sites with equal precision. And me, I stayed quiet, moved cities, changed careers, let people forget where I came from and who I stood beside in candlelight. But none of us ever left, not really. Our names still lived on those lists, those emails, those untraceable donations, those midnight favors that kept each other clean. And the moment Maya said his name over mimosas, I knew I wasn't walking into a wedding. I was stepping back into the hall, just with better lighting. Some nights are so sharp they stay lodged beneath your skin. That night was one of them. It started with music, not the kind piped in for ambience, but real, live, aching, deliberate. Julian at the piano, fingertips dancing like he was alone. Like no one in the hall could see him bleeding something unspoken into every note. The initiation had ended hours before. Whiskey had dulled the buzz of ceremony. Laughter echoed off the stone walls. Everyone else scattered, some to the study, some to the cellar, some upstairs where things were always happening that no one admitted to. But he stayed at the piano. And I stayed at the edge of the room, near the velvet drapes, my glass empty, my name already written into too many ledgers that didn't belong to me. I didn't move. Neither did he. When the song ended, he looked up. Not startled. Not smug, just steady. We didn't speak. He stood, walked past me without a word. Down the hallway through the north wing to the old library we'd been told to leave alone. No cameras, no windows. He didn't have to look back to know I'd followed. The door closed behind us with a sound that still hums in my bones. Inside, dust, shadows, the scent of ink and bourbon and old ambition. There were books we never opened, secrets we never shared. And in the middle of it all, him and me, no vows, no promises, just heat, just breath, just history already beginning. What happened that night never got spoken. Not to friends, not to the society, not even to ourselves, but it happened. And Maya doesn't know. I found him in the hallway during the third dress fitting. Maya had gone to the restroom, giddy on espresso and highlighter swatches. The other bridesmaids fluttered around the tailor, comparing necklines like their future depended on silk ratios. And there, he was Julian leaning against the marble wall, scrolling through his phone like he wasn't about to marry someone who'd never seen him without a mask. He looked up before I said anything. That smile again, polished, easy, perfect. I walked past him slow. He fell in step beside me. Maya looks happy, I said. She is, he replied. That's what matters. We kept walking. Low heels on polished stone, two ghosts in a hallway of lace and lighting. Then, as we reached the service doors, he paused. You remember the rules. His voice was light, measured, like he was asking if I remembered the RSVP date. I didn't turn. Which rules? I asked. The ones we swore on back then. My lips curled, not a smile. No press, no pictures, no repeats. And no talking, he added softer, about society stuff. Now I turned, looked him in the eyes. They weren't the same ones that watched me from across the piano bench. Not darker, just emptier. You think I've said something. I think you know better. It sounds like a threat. It's not, he said, but it was a soft one. The kind we were both taught to use. We stood there for a second too long, just enough to become a question if anyone noticed. Then I stepped past him and whispered, if I wanted to talk, Julian, I'd do it in Latin. He didn't follow. The wedding was a week away, and the guest list glittered like a threat. The kind of list that didn't need last names, just legacy. There were daughters of diplomats and sons of tech moguls, former Rhodes scholars, gallery owners with secret lineages, a hedge fund heir who once offered to buy the moon on a bet, two minor royals, one disgraced, and me, no title, no inheritance, just a past tied up in a seal I'd never fully broken. We gathered for fittings and tastings and photo ops that looked candid, but were choreographed down to the tilt of a champagne flute. Maya moved through it all like a spotlight, glowing, curated, impossibly graceful. She kept me close. Always a touch on my shoulder, a whisper in my ear. I want you next to me when I walk down the aisle. I smiled, said yes. The other bridesmaids wore politeness like pearls, smooth on the outside, sharp beneath. I was included in the group chats, tagged in the stories, invited to the bachelorette dinner where everyone drank too little and smiled too much. But I wasn't inside. Not really. They knew something was off. They just hadn't figured out what. Julian kept his distance. No more hallway moments, no accidental brushes of the hand, just polite nods. Small talk rehearsed to perfection. To anyone watching, we were strangers. To everyone else, he was Maya's groom. To me, he was a mirror I'd spent a decade avoiding. And in that final week, with flowers arriving by the truckload and menus printed in gold foil, I could feel it. The wedding was coming, but the reckoning was already here. It dropped on a Thursday. The blind item. Buried between celebrity prenups and whispered pregnancy rumors on a gossip site known for never naming names, only giving just enough for the right people to flinch. Yale's favorite secret society boy is marrying a woman who has no idea what he did in the library. But someone else in the wedding party does. That was all it said. No names, no photo, just blood in the water. The group chat exploded within minutes. Lara, what the actual hell? Priya, this isn't real, right? Maya, who sent this? Jess, wait, the library? My screen lit up with message after message. Questions layered under questions. No one said Julian's name, no one had to. Maya went silent first, then the chat did, until finally. Maya, be honest, did someone leak this? No one replied, except Julian, not in the chat, but in person. I felt him before I saw him. That night, at the pre-wedding cocktail mixer in the courtyard of a borrowed estate, I stepped out for air and found him already there. Alone. Loosening his tie with the same hands, I remembered gripping the edge of that piano bench. His voice came low, smooth, as if we were picking up a conversation we'd paused 10 years ago. You know what people think. I didn't move. He looked at me not like a groom, not like an old lover, like a strategist. They think it's you. I didn't deny it, didn't flinch. Because I saw the truth in his eyes, it scared him, and he thought I might speak it. The wine cellar was too quiet. Cool stone, rows of bottles older than our secrets. A locked door that Julian opened with the ease of someone who never needed permission. He closed it behind us, didn't speak. Just stood there back to the door, hands clenched like he was holding something fragile or trying not to. I didn't move. Didn't sip the glass I was holding. Just waited. You told someone, he said finally, not a question. An accusation dressed like disappointment. I stared at him, at the perfect collar, the perfect posture, the cracks behind his eyes. If I wanted to ruin you, I said, I'd have done it in Latin. His jaw tightened. No one else knows. I arched a brow, you sure about that? There was no camera, no one saw us go in. Memory's a camera, Julian. He stepped forward, not threatening but too close for comfort. His voice dropped. You think Maya won't connect the dots? I tilted my head. You think I care? She loves you. She loves the version of me that doesn't exist. Same as you. He flinched, a small one, like I'd pressed on a bruise he forgot was there. I didn't want this to happen, he said. I was trying to keep it clean. The society was never clean, I said. It was curated filth. Silence, then softly, please just don't say more. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized for the first time he wasn't afraid of losing Maya. He was afraid of losing the version of himself he'd built on silence. And I was the only one left who remembered the original draft. Maya snapped at the tailor. Not loudly, just sharp enough that the air shifted. It was a small thing. A hemline too long, a pin too tight. The kind of detail brides usually wave off with a laugh and a "we'll fix it." But Maya's voice cut through the boutique like a glass breaking under silk. Can you just do it right the first time? The room went still. The tailor stammered an apology. The other bridesmaids exchanged glances. I stood in front of a full-length mirror, pretending not to watch her unravel. She turned to me moments later, smile reapplied, voice pitched to polite. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm just tired, too many decisions. I nodded, she stepped closer, lowered her voice. Have you seen Julian today? Not since last night. She bit her lip, hard. You don't think there's any truth to that post, right? I tilted my head. Which part? She blinked. The library, the wedding party, I mean it's all fake. Obviously, but it's just so specific. She was spiraling, too many fittings, too many headlines, too many eyes on her ring, her dress, her groom. I wanted to feel sorry for her, but irony doesn't leave much room for sympathy. She reached for my hand. You'd tell me, right, if something felt off. I squeezed gently, just enough to reassure, not enough to answer. She smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. And for the first time since she asked me to stand beside her, I think she started to wonder why I said yes. The envelope arrived without a return address. Slipped under the door of my hotel suite sometime between the rehearsal dinner and the champagne toast. No note, no fingerprints, just wait. Inside, a photo, grainy, nightlit. A candle in the background, the edge of a piano bench, my hand on Julian's wrist, his mouth near my ear. No kiss, no date. but anyone who'd ever loved wrong would recognize what was captured between us. And the locket, silver, oval, dented, I hadn't seen it in years. Inside it once was a photo of me at 17, tucked behind a Latin inscription given only to society members who passed the third gate. I lost it the night of our final hall ceremony. Or maybe I gave it away. Now it was here. Which meant someone else still had theirs, still remembered, still wanted something. I stared at the pieces laid out on the table like an offering or a threat. It wasn't just a warning, it was a message. You were always the wild card. That was what they used to call me. Whisper it with a smirk, a shrug, a hint of respect under the fear. Julian had said it once too, after I stood and refused to recite the closing oath unless they changed one line. They did, and they never forgot. Someone wasn't trying to stop me. They were trying to use me, or frame me. Either way, it meant this wasn't about Julian and Maya anymore. It was about the hall. And the war they thought they buried in the dark. By the next morning, the bridesmaid group chat was dead. Not paused, not muted, dead. No gifts, no outfit selfies, no countdowns, just silence and the quiet stench of suspicion. I walked into the bridal suite for the final hair and makeup session, and it hit me before I even crossed the threshold. The shift, the way Lara didn't look up, how Priya only smiled with her mouth. Jess barely nodded. Maya greeted me with a hug, a tight one, a little too long, like she was hugging a threat she hadn't confirmed yet. No one mentioned the blind item. No one asked about the envelope. But the silence wrapped around me like static. Even the stylists felt it. Brushes slowed. Foundation came out in lighter shades, like they didn't want to touch me too much. I sat for my turn, staring into the mirror, surrounded by women I used to study with, drink with, take shots with on rooftops in Madrid. Now they whispered behind coffee cups and watched me like I might detonate. I didn't say a word, didn't defend, didn't explain, because I knew the rules of exile, especially the polite kind. Once you've been marked a liability in a room full of curated loyalty, no one says it out loud. They just stop meeting your eyes, stop replying, stop trusting. But I wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not when the story was still being written, and certainly not before the toast. We met in the garden behind the chapel, under a canopy of white roses that cost more than my first car. Julian was already there, bow tie undone, jacket slung over a stone bench. He looked like every photograph of a man who gets what he wants and knows he's running out of time. I didn't say anything. Neither did he, not right away. We stood in silence, just far enough from the guests that no one could hear, but close enough that we weren't technically alone. He spoke first. I need this wedding. I raised an eyebrow, because you love her. He didn't answer, didn't flinch. Just ran a hand through his hair and stared out at the garden like it might give him an exit. There are things you don't know, he said. There always are. I'm not just protecting myself. I laughed, it wasn't kind. Julian, you've never protected anyone but yourself. Not back then, not in that room, not in the aftermath. He looked at me then, really looked at me. And for a split second I saw it, not guilt, not fear, panic, something bigger than Maya. Bigger than us. They're watching, he said. I stepped closer. They always were. He hesitated. If this wedding doesn't happen. What? I asked. The society revokes your legacy badge. Daddy pulls your seat off the board. No, he whispered. Something worse. I didn't press him because I didn't need to. Julian was unraveling, and I was no longer part of the problem. I was the variable no one controlled, and he knew it. The message came folded inside a cocktail napkin, tucked under my hotel door. No envelope, no signature, just a time, a place, and a line scrawled in handwriting I hadn't seen since the hall. You're not the only one with stories. I skipped the final rehearsal brunch, told Maya I had a migraine, slipped out the back exit in a linen dress and flats, no jewelry, no trace. The bar was empty except for one man seated near the window, sipping something neat and expensive. His face was older, harder time had filed him into a stranger. But the tilt of his head, the half-smile, the insignia tattooed faintly on his ring finger. It was him, Noah Halston, class of '08, last seen in Berlin. Thought to have disappeared after the Geneva fallout. He didn't stand when I approached, just gestured to the seat across from him. I heard there's a wedding, he said. I sat. Thought you were dead. He smirked, still am. In the ways that matter. The bartender passed by, didn't make eye contact. Noah leaned in. They think you leaked it. I didn't. I know. He swirled his drink. But you're the one everyone's watching, which makes you valuable. Or disposable. I met his eyes. Why now? Because you've got something they don't. What's that? He leaned back, nothing left to lose. I stared at him. He tapped the rim of his glass. They're afraid of the wrong scandal. The hall's foundation was built on secrets. Yours is just the first spark. I narrowed my gaze. Then why warn me? Because I remember what they did to Clara, he said. The name hit like a match. He slid a folded paper across the table. In case you forget how this ends when someone talks. I opened it. It wasn't a threat. It was a transcript. A confession, signed by a name I knew. And sealed with the same emblem Julian once swore would never surface again. Maya knocked on my door just before sunset. No entourage, no champagne, no photographers. Just her barefoot in silk shorts and a white tank top, eyes ringed in something that wasn't mascara. I opened the door without a word. She didn't wait for an invitation. Just stepped inside and stood near the window, staring out at the courtyard below where the wedding crew was setting up the arbor. She didn't speak right away. I didn't rush her. Then, softly, did anything ever happen between you two? Not an accusation, not a whisper. Just a question dragged out from somewhere deep, the kind you practice asking in the mirror 100 times before you say it out loud. I could have lied. I should have, but instead, I hesitated only for a second, but that second was long enough. Maya turned around, eyes dark. You didn't even need to answer. I opened my mouth. No, she said, don't. Maya, it was. Before me. I nodded. Before us. Yes. Then why do you still pause like it matters? That stopped me. She walked to the vanity, picked up a comb, then set it down again. I knew something was wrong the second you said yes, she said. You hate champagne silk. I almost smiled. She didn't. I wanted you next to me because I thought you were the safest person in the room. She looked at me, and maybe you still are. But I don't know who you're safe for. She walked to the door, paused. I asked you here to stand beside me. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Then she was gone, and I was alone again, still in the dress, still holding secrets. And the wedding was in 12 hours. The wedding began anyway. Because rich people never cancel. Not for rumors, not for betrayals, not even for secrets unraveling beneath champagne tents. The estate was transformed, rose petals on the marble stairs, a string quartet flown in from Vienna, custom-embroidered linen napkins that spelled forever in gold thread. Guests arrived in tailored tuxedos and vintage couture, laughing like they weren't waiting for the ground to shift. I stood with the other bridesmaids under the magnolia arch, hair pinned, expression blank, lips glossed in the exact hue Maya had chosen for all of us, subtle opulence. The crowd glittered. Politicians, heirs, legacy names that held real estate in headlines. Some of them I recognized from the hall. Most didn't recognize me or pretended not to. Julian stood at the altar like a man immune to consequence. His bow tie perfect. His expression unreadable. Maya walked down the aisle to a piano version of a Fleetwood Mac song she once told me reminded her of her mother. She looked radiant, but not soft, polished, cold like a statue built for legacy. I watched every step, every breath, and all I could think was they're all watching the wrong drama. They thought the scandal already happened, the blind item. The rumors, the tension, but the truth was still buried, and my glass was waiting on the table. Because when the toast came, no one would be ready, not even him. They handed me the mic after dessert. Not because I volunteered, but because Maya insisted. She's been with me through everything, she said, raising her glass. She deserves the final toast. I stood slowly, every eye in the garden on me. The sun had begun to set, casting the tablecloths in that golden shimmer that flatters even the worst intentions. I cleared my throat, lifted my glass, smiled. Most of you know me as the bridesmaid with the resting murder face, I said lightly. Laughter rippled, too loud, too eager. But Maya knows me differently. She knows I prefer sharp honesty over soft compliments, so I'll say this simply. I looked at Maya, then at Julian. You look perfect tonight. They smiled together. And sometimes perfect isn't born, it's built. layer by layer, lie by lie. The laughter died. I went on. I remember when Maya first told me about Julian, I didn't say much. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew what it meant to protect a memory. I swirled the champagne in my glass. Some of us met in places we don't talk about, behind doors we were told not to open again, in rooms with crests on the walls and ink on our wrists. Julian's smile twitched. The laughter didn't come back. In one of those rooms, someone played piano, I said. Someone else listened. And a promise was made, not of love, but of silence. My gaze found his. Julian's hand tightened around his glass. I kept that silence. I looked at Maya, but today's not a day for secrets. It's a day for beginnings. I raised my glass, to truth in whatever form it arrives. And Julian dropped his glass. It didn't shatter. But the sound cut through the garden like a scream. The room froze. Not the kind of freeze you see in movies, no gasps, no dramatic music swell, just a collective breath held beneath layers of silk and tuxedos. Maya didn't blink, didn't move. She just stared at me, then at Julian, then at the glass on the floor. Julian bent to pick it up, slow and mechanical, like he thought he could gather whatever had slipped through the cracks. The guests whispered. The hall members didn't. They shifted in their seats. Subtle, synchronized. The way we were taught to move when optics mattered more than morals. Jess reached for Maya's hand. Priya leaned toward Lara with a whisper that died before it reached her lips. Julian straightened, set the glass down. His face was pale. Too pale, the kind of pale that comes when the illusion starts to splinter. He opened his mouth to speak, but Maya beat him to it. "I want to dance," she said. Her voice was clear, loud enough to cut through the static. She stood, smoothed her dress, and smiled like nothing in the world had changed. Because Maya knew how to perform, how to pivot, how to wield silence like a blade. The band struck up a slow rhythm. Someone, probably her planner, signaled the staff to begin clearing the plates. And just like that, the moment passed. But not for Julian, not for me, not for the members of the hall whose eyes followed me through every shadow. Because now everyone knew. They just didn't know how much. I found him behind the altar, where the roses had started to wilt under the weight of too much sun and not enough sincerity. He was sitting on the edge of the stone ledge, bow tie undone, jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up like he was trying to peel back to a version of himself that didn't exist anymore. He didn't look at me when I stepped into view. He just said, "You could have stayed silent." I walked closer. I did for years. He laughed, a hollow, bitter thing. "You really waited until that moment. You gave me no choice." He looked up. "I gave you every chance to stay quiet." "No," I said, voice sharp now. "You gave me every chance to stay complicit." We stared at each other, two relics from the same sealed chamber, cracked in different places. "You don't understand what this wedding meant," he said. "I understand exactly what it meant," I replied. A seat at the table, a legacy polished in champagne and silence. "She didn't deserve this. She didn't deserve you." He stood, walked toward me slowly, not with menace, just exhaustion. "This could have been clean," he said. I tilted my head. "You think that toast was messy." His eyes narrowed. "You didn't name names," he murmured, "but they know." "I know," he said. He looked down at his hands, then at me. And for the first time all day, he didn't look like a groom. He looked like what the hall had always created, a man built on secrets, now crumbling under the weight of one that slipped. He shook his head. "Now we both lose." I stepped back into the light, chin high. "No," I said, "now we both tell the truth." Maya didn't cry, not during the first dance, not during the slow fade of guests who sensed a storm and left before the lightning struck. Not even when the planners whispered about contract clauses and refund policies. She finished the reception alone. One hand trailing over the dessert table, the other wrapped around a flute of something sparkling and unloved. The band kept playing, because that's what they were paid to do. Julian had vanished after our conversation behind the altar. No goodbyes, no explanation. Just a groom-shaped vacuum where his future used to be. And Maya, she adjusted, gracefully, like someone who'd practiced her entire life for a moment she never thought she'd need. I watched her from the edge of the lawn, hair still perfect, back still straight, glitter catching the light as if nothing cracked beneath it. She made a toast to no one for no reason and drank it like a baptism. then turned and looked straight at me, not with blame, not with sorrow, just clarity. The kind that lives in people who have outgrown being fragile. I didn't wave, didn't nod, just watched. Because she was no longer the girl who asked me to be her bridesmaid over mimosas and ring selfies. She was becoming something else. Polished, protected. Exactly what the society always wanted from its women, quiet strength dressed in diamonds. But I knew the difference. She wasn't broken, she was rebuilding, and this time without permission. I walked through the crowd like a ghost they finally remembered to fear, not because I raised my voice, not because I named names, but because I existed, still standing, still silent, still sharper than they thought I'd be. They watched me with the wide eyes of men who forgot that a woman who keeps secrets can also use them. A senator's daughter turned her face away. An oil heir whispered something to his brother too late. I'd already heard it. The hall was still intact, technically. No oaths broken, no direct confessions, just the truth laid bare in suggestion, the kind that stains more than it proves. And me, I wasn't escorted out. I wasn't blacklisted. I wasn't punished. Because to punish me would be to acknowledge me, and they don't do that, not with wild cards, not with girls who were never supposed to stay. I passed Julian's uncle by the fountain. He didn't speak. I passed Maya near the bar. She held her gaze on me this time. Didn't flinch. Didn't fold. She lifted her glass in the faintest toast. I didn't return it, just kept walking. The dress clung to my skin like armor now, the heels no longer pinched. Someone tried to stop me at the gate, a planner or a cousin, or maybe a man who wanted to believe his version of the story mattered. I didn't even slow down. Because I wasn't the one who broke the code. I was just the reminder of what they buried, of who they left out, of how legacy doesn't always burn, sometimes it rots from within. And I was the match they forgot they handed. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.